Well, hello, everybody. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. Tonight's show is not sponsored by anyone. This is something I'm doing because it's my show and I want to, and I think this is important information. And I'm going to tell you from one side of an issue because, again, that's just how I'm going to do it. Not how I did it when I was a journalist, but right now I'm just a person who gives information to people. This is a measure in Montana. It's called Measure 128, has to do with abortion. I think my Oregon viewers, you will also be interested in this too, because I think some of this is already happening in Oregon, but I think it also, if you are a person who does not support abortion, this is something, well, I think it's for all of us to listen. We really need to be thinking about this stuff long and hard. And there's a lot of misinformation about Roe versus Wade being overturned and what that did. It didn't change anything except turn it over to the states, because the Supreme Court said that it should be up to the states, which is always should have been, not up to the federal. I don't need the federal government involved in any more of my life, especially the medical decisions that myself and my wife are going to make within our life. I don't need the federal government involved. So if you put it into the state's hands, that gets me one step closer to where I can deal with it on my local level with legislators. It's a little hard to deal with it with the Supreme Court. So we're going to talk with Derek A. Stryker from Montana Family Foundation. That was the most sweaty I got just having to say your last name.
No, the A is invisible, Rick. That's well, why.
And if I hadn't asked you ahead of time. So let's start with this real quick. What is the Montana Family Foundation, and what are some things that you guys do? Because I think that's really important before we talk about this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on, Rick.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, so the Montana Family Foundation is a research and educational nonprofit organization. And we have four main action areas here in Montana. So life, that's what we're going to talk about here today. Religious liberty, marriage and family, and school choice. Montana Family Foundation has actually been around for over 2 decades now. You can kind of think of us as anytime the ACLU or Planned Parenthood is on one side of the issue, we're going to be on the other side, promoting family and faith and freedom. So that's what we're all about in a nutshell.
So I've seen a lot of information coming out from, I saw some stuff on, I went to the website, the Yes on 128, and saw Planned Parenthood and everyone really pushing this out. And they leave a lot of words out of sentences, making this sound a lot different. And I think this is one of the problems when I was in Oregon that I had with the voters pamphlet is you can, when you're an organization and you're fighting for it, you can pay, you can call it whatever you want. And you don't have to, nobody's there to check what your verbiage or what you said. So people understand in Montana, and this was an initiative petition, and they did get far more signatures than they needed to get it on this ballot, which obviously concerns you guys.
Well, absolutely. So the way the process works, I mean, it started back in November of last year, which was actually kind of a late start for them. So they put this initiative into the hopper, and the Secretary of State takes a look at it, then Legislative Services takes a look at it, and then it's passed along to the Attorney General's office, and they do what's called a legal sufficiency review, and they're looking to see, well, is it legally sufficient? And the main thing they're looking at is, does this only do one thing, or is it asking the voters to vote on multiple things? Because you can only change one part of the Constitution at a time. The Attorney General's office said, this is what they call log rolling. You're asking the voters to vote on multiple different things, which it does. It went up to our Supreme Court. They, not surprisingly, disagreed with our Attorney General. We have a very progressive Supreme Court here in Montana, and a very conservative Attorney General. And so, forget the notion that there's no politics involved in the judiciary. There are.
Yeah.
So our progressive Supreme Court rejected this opinion by the Attorney General and said it is legally sufficient. So it moved forward from there. The Attorney General then had an opportunity to write the ballot statement, which is the tweet. You can think of it as the 135 words that the public is actually going to see on the ballot.
Right.
This is what the public is going to read and how they're going to determine whether or not to vote yes or no. It was very confusing the way Planned Parenthood put it together. And they have an organization called Montanans Securing Reproductive Rights. That's their ballot issue committee. It's Planned Parenthood. That's who's behind this. Very vanilla language, very confusing, very vague and ambiguous language. So the Attorney General rewrote it. The Attorney General's explanation of what voters were going to vote on was accurate. It went up to the Supreme Court again. The Supreme Court again disagreed with our Attorney General and went back to, they actually rewrote the ballot issue language.
The Supreme Court did.
That's right. Yeah, our Supreme Court wrote the language. They changed two minor things, but largely accepted what Planned Parenthood had written and changed a couple things. So then that went to the signature gathering portion of this process, and they had about 2 months to gather 60,000 signatures. And they did. They met that threshold. There were reports out there that they had gathered 119,000 signatures. I think at the end of the day, when all the dust settled, because a lot of signatures get rejected in this process because they aren't registered to vote, or they're not voters, or they write down the wrong name or something. But I think they only had about 70,000 signatures that were actually accepted and legitimate. So, but they nonetheless qualified. So it's going to be on the ballot in November.
So what does this do specifically, 128?
Well, it does more than one thing, first of all, which violates our Constitution.
And now, so it changes your Constitution. This is one of those that has to change the state constitution.
Yes.
And so you're saying it's not, that it's doing, you're not supposed to.
It's doing more than one thing.
Only supposed to be one thing. And so what does it do?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. So right now in Montana, maybe just for the benefit of your audience, in Montana, abortion is allowed. It is permitted. We have a case from 1999 called Armstrong, and it stands for this proposition that you have procreative autonomy, which is a fancy legalese way of saying you have the right to abortion.
How late? How far can you go?
Up until the point of viability. And that's an important question. I'm glad you asked it. Up until the point of viability. And that's generally accepted as somewhere around 22 weeks in Montana and elsewhere. But it depends on where you live, right? I mean, that's why viability is such a poor benchmark.
So here in Montana, it's 22 weeks.
22 weeks in Montana under current law. So abortion is permitted. It's not like abortion is outlawed.
Yeah, the way you hear it from the opponents or the supporters of this measure, I've heard their stuff out there online, and it sounds like it's getting and it's getting taken away, and they're gonna destroy the women's rights to their bodies, and it doesn't do any of that. The current law.
No, it doesn't. Current law does not do that. In fact, every meaningful pro-life piece of legislation that's been passed by our legislature over the past decade has been struck down in the courts. A recent example would have been the parental consent law that was struck down by our Montana Supreme Court just this past month. And that was a case that took more than a decade to reach the Montana Supreme Court. So yeah, abortion was not under threat here in Montana by any means. So this measure, and I think it's really important, I think to distill it down, at the heart of it, it's about no parents, no doctors, and no limits. Just an easy way to remember what this is really about. I say no parents because this would not permit any guidance or involvement of parents in a minor girl's abortion.
So what does
no
that
notice,
mean? No parent,
no consent.
They don't have to have their parents' consent.
Right.
At 12 years old?
12 years old. Nope. No parents' consent.
For an abortion in Montana.
For an abortion. No notice to parents. This could be accomplished. Let's say a terrible situation, but this could happen and has happened where you have a child trafficker and a child who is a victim of trafficking who becomes pregnant, and the child trafficker takes the minor to a Planned Parenthood facility, and they conduct an abortion on a 12 or a 13-year-old, and the parents know nothing. This measure will protect child traffickers, sex traffickers, and Planned Parenthood.
How many parents do you think parents in Montana understand that about this?
No, I don't. I think the truth about CI 128 is being hidden from the voters.
So it sounds like this, I'm sure when they, hand the sheet to people and say, you're protecting a woman's right to have an abortion, a sign,
Right.
But then people don't read the details. And, because to me, something like this, what makes it kind of a little bit frightening is, so what's next?
Right.
If a 12-year-old doesn't have to tell their parents they're having an abortion, then does this go over to gender reassignment things too?
It's very interesting that you bring that up. We actually, so we just had Rob Nadelson, Professor Rob Nadelson, who's actually a constitutional scholar. He's been cited by pretty much every Supreme Court justice on the court many times. He writes articles. He's been a professor at the University of Montana. I'm not sure where he's teaching right now, but incredible guy. He just did an analysis for the Montana Family Foundation. You can find it on our website at montanafamily.org. And he goes through this. I mean, one of his final points on his legal opinion, and I'll just read it because I got it pulled up here, Rick.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that CI 128 contains vague and unusual language that can be used to advance the gender fluidity program. In other words, CI 128, if enacted, could be used as a legal wedge for child mutilation and invasion of women's sports by biological males.
So it opens the door.
It opens the door. Interestingly, if we're talking about women's reproductive rights, you would expect to see the word woman or women in the measure. That is not there. They refer to somebody who is pregnant as a pregnant patient. They refer to abortion as a pregnancy outcome. Well, what is a pregnancy outcome? I mean, that could mean having a baby, not having a baby. This measure would shelter doctors who commit malpractice while trying to help someone give birth. If you botch a delivery, and that's an unwanted pregnancy outcome, you would not be able to hold the doctor accountable or liable for that medical malpractice in that situation under this constitutional language. People don't know that either.
Well, I want you to hit the other two as well, but I have this question in my head real fast. Why should people be concerned that this is not just a measure, but it's a constitutional amendment? Because that's when you amend the Constitution in a state, it's really hard to go back and fix it.
It's really hard to unwind and unring that bell. This will have generational repercussions if passed. Think about Roe versus Wade. Okay, that was 1973. We had 50 years of a national, I guess, understanding that this was a constitutional right. So you have generations of people growing up believing or understanding that abortion was federally okay. It was allowed. And then you have it overturned. So now there's some sort of confusion, maybe, depending on which state you're in.
Like now you can't get an abortion in Montana. Well, you still can right now. You currently can. And that's the case all over the country. And there are some states that are working to ban it. Right. But do you think that this came up because I don't remember, but you're in this business. So it wasn't the last session, weren't there some measures that came up that were trying to put some new limits on abortion?
Well, there was legislation that put regulations on abortion. Yeah. For example, one measure that was passed in Montana, and this is actually just supported by the overwhelming majority of the public, is an elimination of dismemberment abortions. Now, we call them dismemberment abortions because that's what it is. The abortion lobby will call it a D&E procedure, a dilation and evacuation. But what that means is you're dismembering a baby inside the womb. So there was a measure, a piece of legislation passed in Montana, signed by the governor, to prohibit dismemberment abortions. That's been enjoined in district court at this point.
So it's stuck in court.
Stuck in court. Yeah.
What's another one? How many were there? Do you know?
Oh gosh, we had, I think, 9 or 10 meaningful pieces of pro-life legislation. We had, and this was an important one. We had one. It's kind of a Hyde Amendment. If you're familiar with the federal legislation, the Hyde Amendment prevents federal taxpayer dollars going to fund abortions under the Medicare program. Now, we had a similar measure or a piece of legislation passed here in Montana to prevent Montana taxpayer dollars, so your taxpayer dollars, my taxpayer dollars, from going and funding abortions in our Medicaid program. That was also enjoined in district court. So right now, your taxpayer dollars could go to fund abortions in Montana. And if CI 128 is passed, more taxpayer dollars will fund abortions in Montana.
And that seems so unfair when it's and I know people will say, well, if you don't get unemployment money and your money goes to unemployment even if you're not using it and stuff like that. But this is different because this is for a lot of people, it's a spiritual, a religious issue. And so your dollars are being taken from you without your consensus and used to do something that you completely disagree with. And it's not like, because I just, wildfires or, there's everything, other things, other programs. This is a real sensitive issue. So this obviously got Planned Parenthood and those groups a little bit antsy. And so they're trying to get this by putting it in the Constitution, by changing the Constitution. You're not, but you're almost stuck. I mean, it's like it puts it it's way harder to turn that boat around than it is. And then what's going to happen to those pieces of legislation that are stuck in district court or in the courts?
That's a really good question. I think with the change in the Constitution, some of those pieces of legislation, it just bolsters the court's ability to strike them down based on a new portion of the Constitution.
So that's what this is really all about. Is Roe versus Wade got turned over. Some of your lawmakers went in and said, okay, we want to put some more restrictions on here, or some things that we think people in Montana would agree with. These groups don't agree with it. So they're going to go way ahead of you while this court process is going on and cut it off at the front so that there's really basically not much you can do about it.
I think that's part of it. I think part of it is the progressives believe that this is a way to generate voter turnout. And so in states where they have really hotly contested Senate races, like Montana, for instance, we have a 3-term senator who's up for re-election, John Tester, Democrat, facing a challenger, Tim Sheehy. And the Democrats think this is a way to drive voters to the polls because abortion's on the ballot. And so if you can get your base motivated to vote for women's rights and vote for reproductive rights, even though that's a lie, that's not what this is about. It's a radical expansion of abortion, including late-term abortion of pain-capable babies, pain-capable preborn babies. This CI 128 allows for late-term abortion.
Doesn't that, Derek, the more involved, not just with this issue, but the more like you get into this political realm, when people just think, oh, here's this thing and they're trying to fight for my reproductive rights. No, you're being used to get people to the polls so that Donald Trump doesn't win and that Tim Sheehy doesn't win, and they get this other bill that they want anyway. All these things, they do want them, but you put it all together in a package, and it's really the whole intent is to to fool the public.
Yes.
Because if you can get somebody to go, hey, and people don't dig enough. They don't. I think we're learning that they don't look into stuff enough. We all want to feel good, so we listen
Yeah.
to the parts we want to feel good. Oh yeah, I should have the right to do what I need to do, not understanding the ramifications that could have. So explain to me the other two. So we have the one.
No parents.
It does three
Uh,
things. No
no
parents.
doctors. No doctors would be the second one. Okay. So I say no doctors because under the plain and easy to read language, so-called easy to read, but it's very ambiguous. You take a look at CI 128, the actual language of what would be placed in our Constitution, not the ballot statement that you're going to read on your ballot, because that doesn't tell you the truth about what this does. If you read the actual language, they say that a treating healthcare professional can make a determination as to whether or not you can have an abortion.
Can I ask a question?
After viability. After viability.
So
Go ahead.
what qualifies as a I mean, can my shaman
Yeah.
who treats me with whatever
Yeah.
does my acupuncturist qualify?
Yeah.
What's the definition?
No one knows. And that's the problem. And the other undefined term in this measure is health. What do you mean by health? Is that mental health? Is that physical health? Is that financial health? It costs a lot to raise a child. What do you mean by health? What do you mean by treating healthcare professional? Can I go to my chiropractor in my 8th month of pregnancy and say, I don't know if I should have this baby. It's bad on my back.
I just lost my job. I need to get rid of this child.
Yeah. And so that's how radical this is. And when I say there's no limits, because that's the last, there's no parents, no doctor.
Give me go back to the viability though. Before we go to limits, go to the viability. What is viability? Is that after it's born? Is that at 8 months, 8.5 months? Where's you have 22 weeks right now.
Yeah.
What's the limit at that point?
Viability doesn't matter anymore under CI 128, because pre-viability, you're allowed to have an abortion, and post-viability, you're allowed to have an abortion under CI 128. So viability doesn't matter; it's irrelevant.
So you can't put a number on that.
No, I mean you can, but it doesn't matter because abortion is allowed either way, before and after. And that's how radical this is. And when people find out that truth, what we're seeing is even those on the far left who are pro-choice, and you can be pro-choice, fine, but even if you're pro-choice, you generally are going to accept reasonable regulation. You're not in favor of aborting a baby in the 9th month of pregnancy.
Not many people are.
Not many people. Yeah. And so
you're certainly not going to be very open to the fact that a doctor, what my realtor has his EMT, has a paramedics degree, was a paramedic at one point, and can also, what I mean? You kind of want, a family practitioner or something named,
right.
Because what does does the radiologist at the hospital count? And what does that person know about any of that?
A healthcare professional.
You would think you'd want it to be a surgeon, a doctor, a specific kind of an obstetrician, since they deal with babies. An obstetrician has to look at this. But ambiguity is the mother of all great measures that take us straight to hell.
Wow. And Rick, this is primed for abuse. I mean, you think about, in Montana, just a few years ago, we had, now we have recreational marijuana in Montana, but we had medical marijuana.
Right.
And there were doctors' offices that would pop up that, it was well known. You could just go to them and get your prescription for medical marijuana. You didn't have to prove anything. You just went there, you paid a certain amount, and you got that. So that could translate in this instance as well. If you want to go get an abortion at any point, at any stage of your pregnancy, you go to this doctor. Or it doesn't even have to be a doctor. You go to this nurse. You go to this healthcare professional and you can get your prescription for an abortion. That's how radical this is.
So what is your greatest fear with this thing?
Honestly, I don't know that I'm fearful. I'm just sad. I just think it's a sad commentary on where our culture is in Montana. And people aren't digging for the truth. So my job, and I'll tell you a quick story because I think it's relevant. So our sixth president, John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams served as president, and then he was a glutton for punishment, so he decided he's going to serve in Congress. He's one of two presidents to do this. The other was Grover Cleveland. John Quincy Adams served in Congress for 17 years after being president. And his big issue was abolishing slavery. That's what he cared about. He every time he spoke, that he was singularly focused on abolishing slavery. And he died in Congress before seeing slavery abolished in this country. But during his tenure, he was interviewed by a reporter that said, why do you keep trying to do this? What are you trying to accomplish? It's not going anywhere. And he said, as human beings, the duty is ours. The result are God's. The duty is ours. The results are God's. One of the interesting things is that during his tenure, he also served with a legislator, a congressman from the state of Illinois, who only served one term from Illinois before he was elected president in 1860, and that was Abraham Lincoln. And he was a mentor to Abraham Lincoln. So I view our role at the Montana Family Foundation, the duty is ours to get the truth out there about abortion, about the precious value of each human life. And that's our duty, to get the truth out there. The results are God's. He can determine how this is going to end up. And we're not ashamed to say that we don't believe abortion is good in any circumstance. We don't think that the circumstances of your conception determine the value of your life. So those exceptions for rape and incest, I mean, it's horrible. It's a violent, terrible act, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to commit another violent, terrible act. So that's where we come from. We believe all life is valuable, and the circumstances of your conception don't determine the value of your life. So we're going to keep trying to push that ball uphill and defend life no matter what. So I'm not fearful. I'm just sad that the truth isn't out there with everyone yet.
What makes me, as a former journalist, what makes me really sad is to see all the misinformation. And like with this measure, I'm a true believer. I'm not supportive of abortion, but I'm also into personal freedom. So if it's legal and people want to do that, that's their choice. And that's between them and God and their child and whatever that is. I'm not going to judge them. I'm going to stand back and go, but when things are manipulated and when half truths are told to get people to trick them into running or voting for something, and people vote for that, makes me sad. That makes me angry. That, we see that going on in politics all the time when people are not, it's like, I'm sitting back there, and you're like, no, that's not the truth. That's not the truth. So, because I believe when people understand the truth, then they make better choices. But then we have a culture now that wants to be spoon-fed information that sounds good to them. And then we have groups that take information, siphon it, sift it through, and then throw it out so it sounds like cotton candy. And everybody's going to munch on it and eat it. And behind the cotton candy is a big piece of manure. And they don't taste it until it's too late. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this isn't cotton candy, it's shit. And that makes me angry. And it makes me sad that people are so gullible and don't do their homework, because I think as a society, in the end, we're all accountable for this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. a lot of times it seems like our politics depend on an uninformed electorate. I
Oh, that's
mean,
what they
that's why,
want, I think. Yeah.
yeah, it's so much easier to control people when you just have to spoon feed them what you want, and they're not doing any digging on their own. Because when people are equipped with the truth, they make good decisions.
I think so too.
Um, so just to equip people even more, I mean, this is not a homegrown effort
Yeah.
to get this on the ballot, and it's not it's very well funded. I can go through just a quick example here. There was
Can you tell me who's funding it?
yeah, I can tell you exactly who's
So is
funding
it
it.
out of state money?
All out of state money.
So
200
this is not Montana. This is
no,
not something Montana like that stirred up in the hearts and souls of people who live in
no,
Montana. This is people outside the state. This is what happens in Oregon all the time. Is
yes,
they bring in measures and stuff and they test them, except I don't think Montana has been a testing ground up until then. I don't think Oregon they know it's crazy enough that hey, let's see if we can pass a measure where even heroin and all that is legal, and then we'll get that way we'll get more people into treatment.
right,
And they passed it, and now here's 2 years later, and they're having to scramble, and the state's full of drug addicts and full of homeless people because it's become Club Med for anybody who doesn't want to have a job and just wants to sit around on drugs. So
yeah.
so I want people in Montana to hear this. Derek is
Yeah,
saying, and looking at the list because you can go on your Secretary of State's website and you can find this information,
you
and he'll
can
tell you
find.
exactly where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a list right now. There was a $500,000 gift from Think Big America, and that organization is funded exclusively by Governor J.B. Pritzker out of Illinois. So why would the billionaire governor of Illinois be contributing to an abortion measure in the state of Montana? Number one, it's to fundamentally change the state of Montana for generations, and number two, it's to make the base get out and vote for John Tester. 650,000 from 1630 Fund in Washington D.C., $250,000 from Advocacy Action Fund in Menlo Park, California, 250,000 from Global Impact Social Welfare Fund in Virginia, another $250,000 from the ACLU, 100,000 from Liz Simmons from California. She's a wealthy philanthropist. The Fairness Project in Washington, D.C., another $500,000. 100,000 from the Delaney Family Trust in Oakland, California. 100,000 from Gwendolyn Sondheim in Rancho Santa Fe, California. 100,000 from Robert Stavis, a venture capitalist in Larchmont, New York. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, it's not Montana money.
So this is an out-of-state effort, and this is, in your opinion, and do you? I mean, I'm not questioning your opinion. I'm just saying, but in your opinion, these people. So the problem for Montana is abortion is not an issue in Montana, and especially not for Montanans.
No.
But you have a senator who's probably going to get squashed by Tim Sheehy. And John Tester, along with the money that they're shoving in to try to get him reelected, this abortion bill is designed to not only change this, which is what Planned Parenthood and some of these folks want,
right,
but it's also so that more of you Montanans will show up at the ballot. That is just so sinister.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, I hope everybody's just sitting there listening to that going, we're a tool,
yes. It's you're a piece on the board game. There's so much more behind every little ballot measure that's on the ballot. There's a reason for it, and
reasons with a plural.
Yeah, there's more than one reason. It's usually more than just voting yes or no on that particular issue.
So when you started working for this organization, Montana Family Foundation, was that a big eye opener when you found out that it's not just an issue about abortion, or it's not just about school choice? Why are unions in Florida? I'm making this up, but supporting against school choice in Montana? What do they have to do with that?
Right. Um, Rick, I think I've known about it for a while. I guess ever since I've been involved. I was in state government as an attorney for a while, and I got to see some of the inner workings like this before. Um, so yeah, I think when I first saw it, it's shocking, but then you realize, well, this is how the game is played. You can scream at the mountaintops and tell people, like, this is why they're doing it. This is who's funding it. But most people just want to turn on the TV and watch their football team on Sundays, and go to work and spend time with their kids. They don't care about everything that's going on behind the curtain in politics. Um, and then they get their ballot in the mail and they try and figure it out at their dining room table on their way into work, or before work. They don't do the digging. They don't do the research to find out. Follow the money is going to give you a big clue
Yeah.
as to who wants this and why. And then they don't do they don't read. If you're not going to read the actual language of this constitutional initiative, and all you're going to see is the ballot statement that's on your ballot, you have no clue what this does.
Do you guys have a voter's pamphlet here in Montana?
Yes, we do. We have a voter guide on our website, montanafamily.org.
But is it do you guys send out a voter's pamphlet with your ballots? In Oregon, they
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, there is a voter information pamphlet at the
is
IP.
it also filled with lots of propaganda as well? Is it
It's supposed to be balanced, so there will be statements one way on either side of this issue in that voter information pamphlet. We're trying to get the truth out there. We believe when people are equipped with the truth, they're going to make good decisions. And when they realize how radical and extreme CI 128 is, people even on the pro-choice side are saying that's a bridge too far. I'm not okay with that. I'm going to vote no.
So what's the good news in all this? Do you think people still have the power? Do you think the possibility of we the people having the power, it's still there, isn't it? The possibility.
Yeah, the possibility is still there, Rick. I agree with that. I think, again, it goes to getting people equipped with the truth. Yeah, we're not going to win the battle if they aren't equipped with the truth. So we have to get that message out there, and that's why I appreciate being on your show and being able to spread this truth. We want to spread the truth in churches, and spread the truth with your friends and your family, and get people equipped with knowledge. Knowledge is power, especially in politics, especially in a political operation which counts on you being illiterate and uninformed. Be informed. Don't conform to that. I think that's important.
I think, you hear so many people go, "Oh, I'm just tired of it. I don't want to deal with it," and stuff. And to me, the real way you fight that is by educating yourself.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden, when the more you know and the more you listen to stuff, then like even with this, I'm going to vote now. I know, I mean, I knew what I was going to vote before, but now I understand this is a bigger deal than I thought. You know what I mean? And I think that, I hope that a bunch of people in my audience are like me, and the fact that when somebody's trying to play me, I am a monster.
Don't be used.
Don't be used. Don't let people use you to get their way, something elected, and slip something through the door. And the bottom line is, who's it going to hurt?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you already have the right to an abortion in Montana up to 22 weeks. Do you think parents should have a say in that for a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl? Do you think that language should be a little clearer than, the guru down the street? It possibly could. What about my trainer at the gym?
Healthcare professional.
He's a healthcare professional.
What does that mean?
So, and it's kind of doing that. So how can people find out more about the Montana Family Foundation? And I'm sure you guys are always looking for people to get on your board or to be part of this. And it's not just about the abortion issue, because this is also school choice, which I know is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. How could people get involved with that?
Yeah, many things. Number one, you can visit our website, montanafamily.org. Uh, that's a great starting point. We have our voter guide there. You can find out about candidates. You can find out about issues. We have an entire tab devoted to CI 128. We've been working on this since January. I'm an attorney. I'm the chief legal counsel for the Family Foundation. I've been involved in 3 different lawsuits over the span of 9 months now, just on CI 128. I would expect there could be more. But yeah, we're going to fight this with everything we've got, because we are equipped with the truth. We know how dangerous this is. You can reach out to me if you have questions. If you see this episode and you want to talk some more, my email is very easy. It's Derek, DEREK @montanafamily.org. Reach out. I'd love to talk to you. I can send you information if you need it. Pretty easy to get in touch with.
One last question. If this passes, is there still an avenue to appeal that or go back, and is there something that can be done at that point?
Yeah, there is. We'll never lose hope. And that's why I say, we're never going to stop pushing that ball up the hill and fighting to defend the sanctity of life. Number one, Montana law does allow for a post-election constitutional challenge. There are some constitutional infirmities with the language that would be placed into the Constitution. Now, again, I'll caveat that by saying we do have kind of a progressive court, and the composition of that court could change after this election a little bit, but we'll see. That might be worth a shot. And then the other thing is, the Constitution can be changed again. So if we get down the line and change hearts and minds on this issue of life, and people actually follow the science, I would encourage your audience, Google this spark of life video at the moment of conception. You can actually see the spark of life at the moment an egg is fertilized. It's an incredible thing to see. They've just recently discovered this. It's a zinc reaction, but the whole egg lights up at the moment of conception. If you follow the science, life begins at conception, and that's a human life that we're terminating through abortion.
Well, and this issue is also parental rights.
Yeah.
And healthcare, and I mean, it's encompassing a whole bunch of stuff. So
that's right.
Derek, thank you for taking the time, and
thanks for having me.
We'll check in with you after this election and see what's going on.
Please do. It's always good to see you, Rick. Thanks
so much. You too, buddy. I'll see you later. Thank you. So there you go. This is what I love about doing this, is that you find, there's so many interwoven things. And I know that can be frustrating for some people. Like if you're not used to that, but to me, every one of those little arms that goes back where you see, oh, that company donated, and that's power, because they probably, if we didn't have laws that made them have to record the money and the Secretary of State's office and have to be able to see that, they probably wouldn't want to share that. But you now have access, you can find out. And you know what? Once or twice after you get called a conspiracy theorist a couple of times, you don't care anymore. It just becomes part of who you are. And you know what it is? It's not that we're conspiracy theorists. That's not what we are. You know what we are? We're critical thinkers. And we scare the hell out of the world. They do not want anybody thinking, and they don't want you to critically think. So what does that mean? That means you should. My mom always called me a troublemaker. And the best thing she ever spoke into my life is how to do that, and how to critically think and look for the story that's not on the outside. Here's the story people want you to see. So what's the story they don't want me to see? And if you do this a couple of times, it's addictive and it gets really fun. And then you realize you can scare the hell out of people just with knowledge. So do your homework, do your research. Don't just vote for a Republican because they're a Republican, or a Democrat because they're a Democrat. When I see bumper stickers that say I vote Democrat or I vote Republican, all that says to me is I'm narrow-minded. And I don't do my homework. So and ask questions. You know, when somebody says, when you're talking to your friends, you're the mouthpiece, you're the we the people. When one of your friends says, how are you gonna vote on 128? Say, well, did you know? And Derek gave you three. Go back and review them. Three things you could talk about real simply, and then tell them, and guess what? The money's not coming from Montana. That'll piss them off. This is not a Montana born. I know I'm not a Montanan. I'm trying, but you people, you're hard. You're hard to get to be a Montanan. And I like that about you. But how dare outside money come in and try to change the constitution of your state? That would offend me. I'm Rick Dancer. This is Get Real. Share it on your page so other people can figure out what the hell is going on and become part of the conspiracy group. See you later. Bye.